Welcome, everybody. Good evening. My name is Tyler Greene, and welcome to today's event. This is a roundtable discussion on the future of the Black community that is being led by a panel of young activists from all over the nation. Before we start, COVID Classroom would like to thank all of our Black-owned business sponsors who made this event possible. You can check all of them out at our website, www.covidclassroom.us, and you can just click on each picture to go to their links. Now, let's introduce the panel. I'm the moderator for the discussion and the founder of COVID Classroom. I'll be attending Morehouse College in the fall. Next, we have Johnnie Brooker. He's a rising senior and the student body president of my alma mater, St. Peter's Prep. Next, we have Mason Holland, who is a rising sophomore and public education and outreach chair at the University of Connecticut. We have Jalsa Drinkard, who's a rising freshman at Columbia University. We have Qiang, who is a rising senior at Westfield High School. We have Nia Phillips, who is a rising sophomore at Spelman College. And lastly, but not leastly, we have Lucas Hjertberg, who's a rising junior at St. Peter's Prep. Again, my alma mater. Throughout the discussion, we encourage you guys to ask questions in the comment section, as we will be selecting a few towards the end to be answered throughout the discussion. With that being said, thank you all for coming, and let's get started. So just to acquaint you guys, we've known each other for about a week or so now. We just want to get straight into the dialogue. And for those who don't know about what's going on in this climate, not just politically, but around the world, my first question to the panelists is, why are the protests necessary? And what is the cause of the riots during some protests?
So when I think of protests, I think of bringing awareness. So police brutality and injustice against the Black community has been going on for 400 years, but I feel like the world has been able to sort of ignore it. But I think now, because not only we're in quarantine, we're not allowed to go anywhere, I think the world has been forced to see what is going on and to see what Black people have been going through. So as a result, people are tired of it. Our generation specifically, we want to see change, and we want those in charge to be held accountable. So protesting is a way to bring awareness, and it is a way to bring attention to the things that would otherwise be ignored.
About the protests, I feel specifically that, the protests are there for a reason, right? There's only so many times you can go through the bureaucracy, so many times you can go to city council meetings, so many times you can vote before you realize that what you want to happen isn't happening. And to speak to the riots, I'm conflicted on the riots because I can't support the fact that people are looting stores. I can't support the fact that people are killing other protesters and police officers. But I can tell you that it's a necessary thing to have happen, because you have people that, when people peacefully protest, people can easily tune that out. People could just go home. People could go to another town. People could not be outside. When you actually have people in the streets rioting, when you have them inside the CNN buildings, when you have people going from place to place, people are, like to Nia's point, people are forced to pay attention to what's actually going on. Not to say that the protesters are rioting, but when you have people that are in the streets doing these things, it brings a sense of awareness to the situation that may not be brought through peaceful protesting. And it also brings a sense of urgency to the issue.
Could you again just reiterate what the difference between a protest and a riot is, just for some people that might not find the disparities between the two?
Absolutely. So protesting is inherently peaceful. It's it's one of the things that's beautiful about the democracy that we have. And it's a place where people are free to voice their First Amendment rights and say whatever they want to say in a loud group setting. Riots are when people they move away from that track. They move away from peace, move towards looting stores. They move towards violence. They move towards wrecking things and spraying graffiti on walls. And I think it should be definitely highlighted that the protests are really by people who want to see change within the institution of the country. The riots are actually completely different. You have people that are just going there to cause havoc and wreak chaos, but inherently both of these things are necessary. You need one side that's peaceful and is demanding that the bureaucracy change, and then you need this other side that, although these things are terrible and these things shouldn't really happen, the actual ideal of what they are and what the image is and what it purports to the rest of the country gives a greater awareness to the side that's being peaceful and voicing their opinions. And they are tied together, but they're not, they're not mutually exclusive to each other, but they are both necessary to have change in this country happen.
Johnnie, you went to a protest the other day, didn't you? Can you speak a little bit on your experience?
Yeah, I did. So yesterday I went to the protest in West Orange, and it was a great sight to see because it was a protest. It was just people. It wasn't just people of color, but it was people of all different races from all different backgrounds coming together in unity. And when I got home, my mom asked me, what did I pick up from that protest? And I picked up on that. It gave me hope, like hope that things will change in the future. And I think these protests, they're important because it not only builds unity, but it's making other people that are not there, who don't support it, uncomfortable. And that's important because these protests, they need to keep on happening so change can come. So the goal of these protests is for different reforms to come into action so things in schools can change, for the government to make different decisions. So this is why I think these protests are very, very necessary. And that's why I pretty much enjoyed my experience yesterday in West Orange.
That's really powerful. You know, being uncomfortable is such a great catalyst for change. Anna, we were speaking about this actually yesterday. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I do. So I think that protests are necessary because it spreads the cause of the Black Lives Matter movement, which I believe is a peaceful movement. And the reason I disagree with looting and rioting is that we have these people who take advantage of the movement and who might not be there to support it, who are wreaking havoc on the country or protesting, and destroying areas. So I do believe that this form of violence is not okay.
For the flip side, for some people that may think that the violence is necessary, what do you have to say to that?
I believe that the violence that has been occurring has really shown the government exactly the depths of this protest, because I also agree with what previous panelists said, as in if it was all peaceful, then maybe people would ignore the issue or they wouldn't take it as seriously. So I do believe that this violence has really just casted light on the issue and has made it more important to everyone who can tune into this and read things on the media.
I also think personally that a lot of times people act in violence because it's the only language that their enemy or their antagonist understands. And we always try to go the peaceful route. And a lot of times that's our initial thought, because we want to create a society that's helpful for everybody. At the end of the day, when there are human rights that need basic needs, you can only short-live your temper and stay composed for so long. And it becomes indecent to expect such composure after such oppression for such long. And a lot of times we're coming from a place of trauma, and trauma doesn't go away easily. It doesn't go away because you want it to go away. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of patience, and eventually our patience does run out. And you have to be willing to accept that if you only want to speak in violence and you only want to pay attention to violence, then we will do so and make sure that you see our message by any means necessary. So when America is like, they shouldn't have been violent, this is what Martin Luther King would want, we're running out of patience. And at the end of the day, we have to do what we need to get our rights by any means necessary. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing.
Yeah. I'm sorry, is it cool for me to jump in now?
Sure, yeah. This is Marc Lamont-Hill. Pleasure having you on. You can go ahead.
Yeah, no, the pleasure's mine, man. I appreciate and admire everything that you all are doing tonight and the conversation that you all are having. And I'm glad to have been able to listen to a little bit of it. The moment we're in is so interesting, and it's challenging. And my daughter wanted to go to a protest last week, and I told her that she couldn't, not because I cared about her going to I've been going to protests since I was her age, younger than her. She's 16. But I didn't want her to bring it back to me, COVID-19 that is, and I didn't want to risk my father, who's 92, getting sick. He's already very weak, and I worry about that. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because the idea of a Black person having to decide between risking their lives by going outside to fight police violence, state violence, or remaining inside and increasing potentially the chances of being subjected to state violence because it doesn't stop, is the kind of ignoble paradox that only Black folk in America have to wrestle with. I mean, can you imagine having to decide between, you know, risking your life outside, or just having to wrestle with the idea of risking your life outside to stop them from killing you, you know, on normal days? That suggests that the moment we're in is one that is exaggerated right now, but that has been produced over decades. We don't just enter a moment like this. This isn't just bad luck. This isn't just a confluence of terrible shit that happened at one time. Like, oh my God, COVID came and then they started shooting us. Well, nah. But the intersection of these two things happens at this moment. But the danger of COVID itself is linked to not just medical challenges, health challenges, epidemiological challenges. But the reason we're struggling with COVID right now is because of an infrastructure that has never been able to adequately protect everyone. A state that has never been able to adequately protect its citizens. This entire moment we're in right now is reflective of a state that cannot or has not adequately defended or protected all of its citizens. So when you go to a place like Atlanta and you see that 80% of people in the hospitals are Black, at the moment where the state is saying, well, let's open up for business. Well, right. that speaks to the disposability of Black life. When you have everybody told to stay home, but we can quarantine. I have privilege, right? I can sit in my house and quarantine and write books and read and talk to y'all on Zoom and all of that. But when I want to go get some food and I got to go to the supermarket, or I got to go to the Target or wherever I go, there's somebody there making $8 an hour who is now on the front lines of the most dangerous pandemic in modern history. A police officer expects it. An EMT expects it. A doctor expects it. But the cashier at Walmart doesn't expect to be on the front lines of an epidemiological crisis when they take that job. But they don't have the luxury of working from home. They don't have the luxury of doing, and then they go home to a housing project where you don't have the luxury of social distancing.
Right.
Because we're dense. Even if I stay in the crib, it's 6 of us, right? And I got to raise money to pay the lawyer to get my son out of prison, because the New York prison, the infection rates are literally 100 times sometimes where they are in other places. I can't social distance in prison. What I can do in prison is make masks and hand sanitizer that leaves the prison and goes to people in New York who can sit at home and work on Zoom. So the entire infrastructure takes the most economically vulnerable people, the most socially vulnerable people, and makes them more vulnerable. So now they're not just vulnerable to the normal stuff, they're now increasingly subjected to premature death because they're poor. And then we get a video and we look at Ahmaud Arbery being killed. And then we realize that they saw the video 3 months before we saw the video. And then we realize, wait a minute, they're only making an arrest because we saw the video, not because they saw the video. They already saw the video. They just know we know. Again, sends a message of what? We not safe.
Right. As a people, we're not safe. And
right.
And that's what leads me to my next question. Because again, like you said before, it's a growing concern about the resurgence of COVID-19 because of the protests. So how do we address COVID-19's effect on the Black community? Because it's obviously affecting us disproportionately and compared to other people of color, and then the majority of Americans, which are white Americans. So how do we address that?
Well, yeah, I think to Mr. Lamont-Hill's point, it takes, like he said, it takes the people that are at the bottom of this socioeconomic period and puts them in a disadvantaged position. And I do want to talk about the issue within COVID-19, that this is not an equality issue. This is an equity issue. You have people that are at the bottom of the totem pole on virtually every economic sector, right? So you have these people that are on the front lines all the time. You have these people that are out all the time, congregated in small spaces all the time. Then when you add that these people live near in industries, near places that emit gas and smoke and all these different things, and then you talk about the fact that there's food deserts, it adds to people having pre-existing conditions like heart disease, and you're talking about, you're talking about asthma. There's so many things as a Black and brown person that you have to deal with COVID-19. And it's not tied to equality. It's not tied to let's write some policy so that my kid could go to school. It's deeper than that, right? And to address it as an equality issue is not right. I wrote an article about this in the Daily Campus newspaper, which is UConn's campus paper. And to address it as an equality issue does a disservice to the people that are suffering from it. I know like 5 people that have died from it. We had a brother at school, his father passed away from it, right? And then all these other kids from our school that are non-Black, that are white, their parents are doing fine and they can stay in their house, they could work from home. Our families and our friends cannot. So, you know, if we have to address this, we have to talk about getting Black people economic reparations, getting us into better positions in which we can financially support ourselves and pull ourselves out of places that would leave us disadvantaged, like, you know, like the place that we were just in.
Right, because it's not too easy to say pull yourself up by the bootstraps without boots. And that's a really big conversation that a lot of people are neglecting when we speak about, the predisposed illnesses that Black people have is the reasoning as to their disproportionate rates of infection. There are a lot of things, and it's deeply rooted. Like Jalsa said, there's a trauma to it because this is over many, many years, over centuries of systematic oppression, not being afforded the same education and not being afforded the same jobs and positions to mobilize economically. And Lucas, we were literally just speaking about this yesterday. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. So racism is something that's plagued our country for the last 400 years. And obviously, I can't speak to the Black experience, but tensions are very high right now. And the situation's extremely combustible with obviously coronavirus and what seems to be a new civil rights movement, hopefully is a new civil rights movement. And it all starts from the ground up, right? So only 5% of our nation's doctors are Black, which is crazy when you think about it. And the lack of representation obviously leads to all of these further issues that we come to speak about. So it's very clear that we need to pretty much change our nation completely from the ground up. And I think this is just, you know, one example of where change needs to happen.
Mm-hmm. And while I do think that to completely solve the issues that are plaguing the Black community, not just in COVID-19, because it's coming from so many angles, economically, in the medical field, in the stock market. There's so many micro factors that lead to a traumatic experience for the Black community during this rough time. And I think that as of right now, since I think we can't just pull up the system from the roots up, because if we do that, then we have no system to kind of rely on, because as much as we want to change and edit what we have already made, we've already become so dependent on it, and society would collapse. There would be anarchy. And we want to make an ideal society for as much people as we possibly can. So I guess, how can we accustom what we have, and how can we negotiate with those who do not see our vision to accommodate to those who need those reparations, who deserve that system of equality? Because I think a lot of people do talk about, let's destroy the system, let's break open the system, let's get rid of the hope, let's get rid of the entire police, let's get rid of capitalism. And while that is an ideal situation, how exactly can we do that without disrupting everything else that we've made and all the other positive change that we have? Because we don't want to take out all the good and try to take out all the bad.
Completely. Because if you uproot the system, you're left with nothing. And then there's a rebuilding phase. And what do we have people to help rebuild now that we only make up 12% of the entire US population? And I'd like to hear what you have to say about this.
So I do agree with Jalsa's point, as she was saying about how we can't take away the entire system, but we can start reforming it. And I also agree that the economic reparations is a great way to go with this, because there's many things about COVID-19 that do affect the Black community. And since the Black community tends to live in densely populated areas, or minorities in general, it's hard. Social distancing becomes a privilege, and it's harder for them to separate from each other and, I guess, become healthy. So I think that the primary way to address these effects are through federal reform, and maybe making testing free so income doesn't have to become such a barrier in a public health crisis.
What other kinds of reforms would you like to see?
So I do believe that free testing is one way to go with it, and I also believe in supporting Black-owned businesses as a major part of it as well.
I think people undermine the power of having your own economic prosperity and economic independence. I think that really makes a community strong. And while there is a lot of industries based off of the creativity and the hard work of minorities, it's not often credited to them, and they often don't own what they have built. So I think being intentional and building for your community, by your community, I think is very essential to building the Black community to what it could possibly be. And while I do think government reparations would be a great way of doing that, I think really investing in our own community and taking the time, especially including my own community, to know that we are worth it and that we don't necessarily have, I'm not saying not go to outside our own community, but there is a stigma that there's a saying that the white man's ice is always colder, and that like anything outside of our community is genuinely better or more valuable. So we just really believe in the quality of what we can possibly build and truly love what we can make for ourselves. And I think that's when we'll see some real change economically and just politically and socially for our community.
Right. And Nia, you're attending Spelman, which is the top HBCU in the country, which is just a full community of African Americans. Or people of color, especially in the Black community. So what is your perspective on seeing change in the future, especially within our community?
So I actually wanted to touch on the COVID-19 and the effect that it has on the Black community. And I guess I can relate it to living in Atlanta when I'm at school. So when I think of COVID-19 and when I think of how Black people are disproportionately affected by the virus, you have to think, okay, why? Why do Black people have all these predisposed conditions? How did they get them? Why don't white people have these? And then if you think about, okay, if they're all living in these areas that are underfunded or highly populated, you have to think about, okay, how can they be healthy? How can they eat healthier? And when I think about that, it is very expensive to eat healthy. It costs a lot more to go out and buy a bunch of fruits and vegetables than to just pick up a pack of chicken or get a 4 for $4 at Wendy's, right?
Right.
And these communities, they do not, at the end of the day, have these type of grocery stores. They don't have Whole Foods in these types of communities, right? And Whole Foods is a great place for you to get healthy meals. But they don't have that. So when I think about Atlanta and I think about me attending Spelman, the immediate area surrounding Spelman is not, it's getting gentrified. So a lot of the people who do not have the means to get healthier food are being kicked out. So I just think it's important, like Jalsa was saying, invest in our own communities. What are we doing as a community to help help Black people to eat healthier, and so that we do not have these predisposed conditions, and so that we do not have as much exposure to COVID-19? Are we building grocery stores in these neighborhoods, or are we ignoring them? So again, it's up to us. It's up to us realizing, what kind of resources do we have and do we not have, and how are we going to supplement that? So.
I completely agree. I think especially, you only touched on it for a little bit, but that gentrification part plays a big role in that as well. That promise of development, but not for our community because we simply can't afford those new developments, which pushes us out and kind of casts us to the side to then fend for ourselves, which leads to more issues. Mason, I think you had something to say about that?
Yeah, the thing that will get us out of these positions, and I saw a couple comments that were talking about capitalism, and is this not an issue with capitalism? It is an issue with capitalism. You know, capitalism is predicated on economic prosperity for the few, you know, as we've seen in so many countries. And it's specifically in our country, because you have so many people coming in and starting at the bottom. The American dream doesn't exist for them. The American dream exists for a certain amount of people, a token amount of people. So the way to combat that, the easiest way for me to just see is through Black economic prosperity. This is why we have these Black-owned businesses sponsoring, because we need to reinvest the Black dollar into these communities. Like Nia was saying, we don't have grocery stores in the hood. We don't have grocery stores in the projects, right? We don't have a Whole Foods in Camden, right? We need to insert ourselves in these positions to help our community through our dollar. That's why all you Black boys and girls listening to this, go to school, do what you want to do in whatever area you want to do, get a business. Don't be economically tied to anything. Pay off your loans, get multiple streams of income. This is how we pull ourselves out of this hole that white supremacy and this tyrannical system has put us in, right? We got to pull ourselves out, right? We got to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps in some way. And you know, if we don't, nobody else is going to do it. We've petitioned to the government so many times about what we can do in terms of programs and in terms of actual policies that will help us in a meaningful way with economics. And we've almost have no answer, right? We have to take the accountability for that. And in addition to that, in terms of bureaucracy, we got to vote people in the office that's going to hold us accountable, right? We have to hold them accountable. We have to vote people in that are going to have our best interests at heart. We also got to have people that are going to ask for that representation as well, right? We can't stay home when there's voting.
Right.
We can't not fill out the census, because that then affects our representation in Congress, right? We need people to advocate for us, but then in turn we need to advocate for ourselves. So with COVID-19, again, like we have to invest the Black dollar back into the community, because if we don't, white people are not gonna come in and be like, oh, I like these bamboo earrings you have. Here's money for that. We got to do that for ourselves. You know? We got to do that. You know? And we run, in terms of everything, our influence is so broad, right? Black culture dominates media entertainment, right? And how many times do we take accountability for that? How many times do we actually get, you know, return on our investment with our representation? You have young rappers and young artists that can't get out of record deals, that can't pull themselves out because these industries are closing in on them, right? Black is beautiful. We got to realize that. And then we got to hold these people accountable. We got to reinvest in ourselves, 100%.
And like you said before, you know, we do need to develop within our communities and really spend that Black dollar within the communities, but we also do need those advocates. So I would like to ask all of you, how is it possible for someone who's not a person of color, someone who's not in the ghetto, who's not in our situations, not living the Black experience, how can they become effective allies to promote the change that we want to see in our community?
That's a great question, because it's valid. And then I say that because it's actually, because I hear it all the time. And with that being said, I saw a post on Instagram today, and it was from a pic of a sign from a protest held in North Plainfield yesterday. And the sign said, will you still stand for Black lives when it's not trending on social media? And I was like, wow, that's powerful. And I say that because a lot of people are joining the cause trying to help out now. But like with anything that goes popular, it then eventually decreases. So as these months move, like protests and all these things are going on, Black Lives Matter, it'll eventually decay and stop. But to be an active ally, you need to keep on going. You need to keep pushing, because for this problem to eventually end, it can't just be Black people to solve this problem. It has to be everybody. We have to all be in one accord and in unity to be an effective ally. So for change to happen in America. So
I think with that, I think people really underestimate the power of actually being genuine, because to a certain extent, we're all ignorant on a certain topic that we don't even know that we don't know about. And we have to be okay with knowing that we don't know. A lot of people are so defensive to thinking, oh, it's okay, I'm not racist, I do this, this, and this. And we're often become very defensive of our own character, but we have to be okay with the fact that we may not just know. Like, there's some things I don't know about many other cultures that I have to be okay with knowing that I acknowledge that I don't know and be willing to learn. So taking that time to just be open that, okay, I may not know, but I'm not going to use my defense that I'm not racist to stop myself from knowing. A lot of people like close themselves off from truly embracing and understanding and appreciating the Black experience. And also just reading. I think a lot of like reading actual books, reading actual newspapers, paying attention to not just what's going on now on social media, but the legacies that came before us all. Kind of maybe see how what has happened led to what is now, and what could possibly become based on what I'm seeing right now. I think that getting a full holistic chronological approach to this racist issues, I think will be the best for an ally to support the Black community and just any person of color who needs support during this racial epidemic.
I think that the most important thing to do, especially as a white person, is to listen. Because obviously I'll never know what it's like to have the Black experience, but through educating ourselves and listening to our neighbors, we can learn what changes need to be made, and we can listen, and then we can advocate. I think it's important to realize that knowledge is power, and we can go out and make a change today, right? We don't put our signs down when we come home from the protest and think that we've solved everything, right? Just because they're not problems that we face, they're still very imminent and very real every day in our country. And being able to learn from other people who don't go through everything that you go through is very important. And then obviously advocating and starting today and getting outside and canvassing for a candidate who stands for more funding for HBCUs or just anything that can improve, communities. I think it's very important to listen and then advocate.
Yeah, I think that was really strong, especially when you spoke about candidates. And this doesn't just go for allies, this goes for everyone in general, right? It's the getting out to vote, right? And a lot of people neglect the importance of the primaries, right? In New Jersey, we will be voting on July 7th. And that is a pivotal time because we are electing the people who will make the direct change in our local communities, right? The president can only do so much. And it's really about, being cognizant of who we're electing into office, what we want to stand for and what we want to see. And I'd like to hear what you have to say.
So I saw a comment addressing this and I just wanted to speak on it a little bit more. So about how to be an effective ally, social media is all about trends. So when we first saw the Black Lives Matter movement trending on social media, you saw people posting chains and saying, tag 10 people who support Black Lives Matter. And suddenly that brings them out to be some kind of activist for Black Lives Matter. And I definitely saw this again with Blackout Tuesday with a bunch of black screens. And I simply don't think that this is very effective, because it is a nice message saying you're out there supporting Black Lives Matter, but is it because your friends are doing it or is it because you want to do it? And another thing I want to add to that is I think that more effective ways to make change, because obviously people might not want to go on social media to advocate for their beliefs because it's something in their personal sense that they don't want to do. But there's other ways, such as calling your congressman or emailing them, or maybe signing petitions, donating or volunteering, and even just like reading on the material. I feel that these are more educated ways to bring us together as a community.
And again, like you all have said, this education is really fundamental to being an ally or just being aware of what's going on right now, and getting out there. And obviously, if you just post one time, a black screen, what is that really going to do? This isn't much of a social media trend. This is, we are in a civil rights movement.
First of all, it hurts me that our lives had to become a trend to gain meaning to a lot of people. And the issue will be for a lot of people, like, how do I continue this? How do I continue advocating? How do I continue to be a part of the movement, right? Protests only do so much, right? That's why at the end, and Lucas could also speak to this, in Hoboken, right? We were at the Hoboken protest, and when they ended the protest, they say, go home, continue to fight. I don't want you to tell me that you care. I want you to show me that you care. right? And it goes not just for the people that are in the bureaucratic positions to make that change. It also goes to the people that are out there protesting, the people that say they care about these issues. I want to see how much you care. I want to see you invest the Black dollar. I want to see you actively go out and support these candidates. I want to see you vote. Don't tell me that you care about what Donald Trump says about Black people and you didn't vote. Don't say that, because you're not advocating for yourself. More than that, you're not advocating for us. So to actually have fundamental change, right, to continue this movement, it has to be accustomed and to become a part of our daily lives. This is a daily struggle for us, and people forget that too quickly. We live in this every day. It doesn't just end when you put the sign down. You wear your color every single day of your life. Every time you go outside, every time you walk into a store, every time you go to class. I gotta live my life as a Black and Puerto Rican man. I don't get to sit down. So as an ally, you have to understand that. You have to realize that this is an everyday thing for us. And when you can go home and forget about it, we can't. But to speak about being an effective ally, like I saw Ms. Walters say, and thank you, Ms. Walters, for commenting that. Listening is vital. You have to listen. It's not, the first thing you have to understand is that whatever you are, as a non-Black person, doesn't matter if you're white, doesn't matter if you're Asian, doesn't matter if you're Hispanic, you have to realize that this issue is not
to open yourself up to that. At the same time, you have to talk to other people that don't get that. There's racism, there's anti-Black racism everywhere, whether it's in the Black community, whether it's in the Hispanic community, within the Asian community, and definitely within the white community. It's everywhere. It's pervasive, right? You even have Hispanic people that are my skin complexion and darker with 4C hair texture saying that they are not Black, right? Anti-Blackness is everywhere. You have to talk to people that don't see that for ignorance and for hatred. You have to be willing to have those difficult conversations. And there's people who have family members I know that don't even want to talk about Black Lives Matter, don't even want to discuss that we die in the streets every day, don't want to discuss how people are legally disenfranchised when they go to prison in certain states, right? You have to understand that. So in understanding that, you got to spread the message. And I know a couple people have seen the video on social media of the girl talking to her father, and her father was talking about how everybody in the ghetto is, you know, their hood, they don't want to get out, they kill each other, all that, right? But she took that time and she recorded that video to show that she was talking to her father. She was trying to get across to him what we try to get across to people all the time, and that's all we ask for. We just ask you to open up the conversation. You don't have to be out in the streets every single day. You don't have to run on a pro-Black platform all the time. You don't have to talk about it or live in it every single day. But what you do have to do is you have to discuss it at certain points. You have to be willing to address those issues. You have to look those problems in the face before they can turn away and become non-existent. So that was my part on that.
Completely. That ignorance can become so blissful when you can't peel off the skin that we see every day. You can't peel it off. And that's why it's so necessary for people that don't look like us to have those uncomfortable conversations with people who don't want to hear it. Because just as she said to her father in the video, she said, the fact that you're not acknowledging it is why it's still a problem. The fact that people are not addressing these issues is why it's still a problem. And Nia, I really want to hear what you have to say on this.
So I just had a very quick point. Throughout social media, and I think like our generation, we feel the need to post everything, and we feel the need to share what we're doing, and I think that leads to performative activism. It's not enough for you to keep your followers by going out to a protest, posting a picture for your aesthetically pleasing Instagram feed, and then going that's not enough. It's not cutting it, right? Because for Black people, this matter is the difference between life or death. It's being killed by the cops because of the color of our skin. So going out and protesting, it's not for our Instagram feed. It is not to be aesthetically pleasing. It is not for you to act like you are supporting us and act like you understand what we're going through or you're here for us, but then go about your day and we never hear from you again. So I also think that goes to the Black community holding non-Black people accountable. So if we see them doing performative activism, call them out. Why did you post a Black screen and then go about your day? What have you signed any petitions? So that's all I'm going to say.
Completely. That performative activism is really coming to light, especially on Instagram, Snapchat. You know, people, I saw a video of a lady who went and took drill bits and a drill, went up to a poster board wall and pretended like she was drilling on, you know, and that was just crazy. And then we have people that literally go to protests to take pictures of themselves at those protests. And it's not enough for that. I call it postivism, because you're just posting, you know, you're just posting the image of what looks like activism. And as much as it is essential that everyone uses their platform, everyone who has some small or large platform on Instagram, so any kind of social media, to share the fact that we need change, but it's not enough to just post it. We also have to sign the petitions that are easily accessible online and free. Lucas, you were at a protest a few days ago. Mason was speaking on it. I just want to hear from your experience, what your activism has been like.
So I think it's very important to educate yourself, right? That girl in the video, when she's speaking to her parents, she only has a different opinion than her parents because she has educated herself. She's taken the time out of her day to go and create a different opinion than those that her parents hold, right? We can so easily go onto social media and see the opinion of some celebrity that we worship and that we follow, and then just adopt what their opinion is. So to watch, you know, there are plenty of things on Netflix and plenty of books to read and articles that are so important on educating yourself on these issues. We, as a young community, need to make sure that we are educated and that we're not just chickens with our heads cut off following whoever the leader is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think relating to Lucas, I think that if people of color can take the time to get through every single day, despite all the obstacles that are putting to them, I think it would be only decent for possibly people who want to empathize with their experience to possibly imagine what they might have to go through, and suppose they don't have to necessarily live through it. But I think possibly just putting yourself in other people's shoes and just possibly thinking on the toll that it might take on them is one way of bringing our communities closer together. I saw a mention on don't understand what white privilege is, and I thought that was really interesting because I think it leads to our next question on like what are tactics or ways that we can have meaningful conversation with people that do not understand the Black experience or do not acknowledge their white privilege. And I think that I think personally what a lot of times people not acknowledging the white privilege comes from subconscious white supremacy, that they feel like they have access to all sort of experiences. And a lot of times that when there is an experience or knowledge that they know that they're able to possess, they deny its very existence. For example, Galileo, he uncovered that they were not the center of the universe and they revolve around the sun, not the other way around. They killed him out of their own fragility. They thought it was easiest to eliminate the knowledge or deny the knowledge that did not support their superiority complex. And I think a lot of times, even though these experiences are rooted in trauma and evil and pain, because they cannot have access to them or they cannot understand them, a lot of times they just deny that very existence, even though they know that it may not exist for them. And while a lot of times for people who do have white privilege, while some of them do acknowledge that, and they do acknowledge that there is an experience, that there's a knowledge that they will never truly understand, I think that's the first step, that knowing that you live a different existence than I live in. Like we could live in the same neighborhood, live in similar backgrounds, and our existence will still never be quite the same. And I think just taking that time to really evaluate that is the best way to start being an ally.
Completely. And well, Mason, really quickly, can you just clarify what the definition of white privilege is, just for some people that may not understand what it exactly is?
First of all, I want to kind of preface this by talking about, first of all, my mother. So Dr. Judy Sorrow is on this call. I'm proud of her. My mother doesn't have to walk through the streets with my skin complexion. My mother is very fair. And like I said before, when they were talking about the protests, at the protests, they told us, don't tell me that you love me, show me that you love me. And from a very young age, my mother put these revolutionary books in my hand that really expanded my consciousness and then, my intellectual capacity as a result. And I started reading when I was very young, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, Malcolm X, Barack Obama. So I had time to accumulate this knowledge, right? And my mother is the true form of what an ally should be for our community. My mother, like I said, is fair. People think that she's Italian or that she's Egyptian, but she's Puerto Rican. Very Puerto Rican. Anybody that works with her can tell you that, right? And I think that, you know, to really emphasize that you care about the Black community, you got to show us. And you have to be willing to discuss things that you don't want to discuss. Discuss racism within the community. You have to teach young Black and brown boys and girls that they're beautiful. Every Black boy and girl that's on this call watching this, I hope you know that you're beautiful, and I hope you know that you're cared for, and I hope that you know that this life that we live, your children's children will not have to live this life because we're fighting this fight now. And to really, you know, like Kat said, Black is truth and beautiful, 100%. So, you know, we have to be willing to have those conversations. And for the people that don't see that, you know, call them out. I saw a comment asking about how you feel about people calling other people out on social media. Call people out that aren't doing enough. Black, brown, or indifferent. If they're white, it don't matter. If they're not doing anything for their people or for people that they should be caring about, let them know and then make it change, right? Get around people that have different ideas. Talk to people you don't agree with on these issues. We've had differences in our opinions on these issues, and we're all, except for Lucas, we're all of color, right? You have to be willing to have those conversations. You can't just sit in one space and expect things to get done. You have to move out of that space to get people to hear what you're saying. D.L. Hughley, I was watching an interview with D.L. Hughley, and they asked him why he went on the Fox News show. And he said, because only cowards play home games. It's true. The only way to grow and to think critically and to expand your knowledge and your intellectual capacity is by talking about things that are tough to talk about. Talk to people that are going to challenge your ideas, challenge your viewpoints, and flesh them out. My mother taught me that. And my mother's not Black, right? So to be an effective ally, you got to educate your kids. There are a lot of Caucasian women on this call that are educators. You got to educate every single kid on the importance of color. You got to talk to each individual person. Let them know that their experience matters, right? How you read books and how you give out reading lists at the beginning of the year, and they see no characters that resemble any of them. That matters. That matters how they're portrayed in education. It matters how they're portrayed in media. It matters how they're portrayed on TV, right? It's got to come from the people that don't really empathize, that can't really express our perspective, right? That's what's got to happen. And there's people that know this information, right? It's your job to disseminate that to the people that hear it, Black, white, or brown.
I wanted to ask another question, which was, can the Black community unify at some point? And will that help to incur change in the future? Mason, you can take it away.
I personally feel like that's a very difficult thing to accomplish. And it's not because I don't believe in the true collectivization of Black people. I just think that there's so many, coming from Jersey, right? Everything is African American. We talk to people as if everybody's African American. That's the main focus. I now go to college in Connecticut. Connecticut has a very high population of West Indians and Africans. And I didn't realize that there were so many differences within our own diaspora. And I was just sitting down and I was thinking like, yeah, we're all Black, but we come from so many different cultures, so many different perspectives, so many different religions, right? There's a lot of difference, right? And that's not to say that we can't collectivize, but not in the way that I think, you know, a lot of people think of when it's in terms of like physical and like we have this like Black Unity organization. It's very difficult when you have people that think in different ways. And that's a beautiful thing. I just think when you're trying to bring together a specific group of people, it can hamper it in some ways. Some people come from a culture in which certain things have already been established and accepted. Other people haven't, right? For example, there's high levels of homophobia in places like Jamaica and DR and Puerto Rico. And certain cultures have not got past that yet, right? So I just think there's certain discrepancies that would get in the way. But in terms of collectivization, I don't think that, I talked to my advisor, Michael Mallard at UConn, and he asked me a question, what do you think the Black utopia is? And I told him, I don't think it's collectivization. I think it's consciousness. It's difficult to collectivize. It's very easy to be conscious. All you gotta do is pick up a book, watch a YouTube video,
right?
Read something, go read an article, read the article that Kat dropped that I wrote, right? Every time you open yourself up to knowledge, every time you read something, every time you watch something informative, you grow and you get more conscious. Now, Black people, a lot of the times we're born in it. Like, we come out the womb with our fist up, right? But for those people that aren't, and for those people that can't really empathize with that, right? Or for people that, you know, Black unity is not as highly expressed, right? And, you know, as African Americans, that's very integral to how we operate. And like in Africa, everybody's Black, you know? The Black is not a minority, everybody's Black. So, you know, once we educate, we all understand what is going on, how we're being oppressed, how we can't get access to these organizations, how these policies that look like they're intended to help us actually set us back, how not voting hurts us, right? And we see what the idiot that we have in the White House now. So if we could all gain some semblance of consciousness, whether it's reading, and I urge you all that are in this right now to look at the chat. They're dropping some knowledge, they're dropping some books, some articles. Go check those out, because those are going to expand your knowledge, your intellectual capacity, right? Just be aware. And once you're aware, that's what they fear. They fear the educated Black man and woman. They fear the educated Black person.
Because then you're aware of what's going on in the system, and that's what's really important.
Absolutely.
Us waking up to seeing all of the issues that are there and all the things that we can improve upon. And just circling back to unity, just because I know, Nia, you're at Spelman again, an HBCU. Can you just speak on that experience and if there is a true unity there that you feel?
So I'm lucky in the sense that going to an HBCU, there's a unity associated with that. So just the name Spelman, we are always going to be unified. We are always going to be Spelmanites. That's our kind of unification. But in terms of the Black community uniting, and just like the differences in, I guess, like what it means to be Black, I've definitely learned that there isn't one way to be Black. I guess like what Mason was saying before, being Black is a spectrum, and regardless of where you lie on the spectrum, knowing at the end of the day, we are all going to go through the same things. So I can say that at my HBCU, we try to emphasize the fact that as Black women, because we're all going through the same things, we have to support each other and be there for each other. We might not understand what someone is going through. I'm not, if I am to support one of my sisters, I don't have to understand what she's going through. I don't, because at the end of the day, I'm going to have my own struggles. So it's understanding that, okay, I might not look like her, exactly like her, but at the end of the day, we're both Black and we support each other, and we have to understand that your struggle is my struggle, regardless of what it is. So
completely. And that goes beyond the color lines as well. Just like you said, just because we don't look the same, we all have our own struggles, but we can all help each other out. Going back to the point of being allies and recognizing the privilege that, you know, white Americans have to shut, you know, their TVs off to what we have going on in our communities. It all ties together. I want to end on this question, which is, where do we go from here? As a Black community, Americans in general that are looking for change in our society, in the system, trying to uproot things without completely dismantling what we have in front of us, where do we go from there? Mason, you can take it away again.
I feel like this is a question just not for our Black viewers, it's also for our non-Black viewers, right? Where do we go from here is pretty broad. I think the first place we start is, like Tyler said, we have primaries July 7th. Our election is in November. We all talk about how much we don't like the current president. Vote him out of office. Go get people to vote. Register to vote. Use your bureaucratic power. Our ancestors died for that right. You don't get to stay home, especially not when doing that puts you in a terrible position, because then you don't have a voice. And I think for the people that go home after this, educate yourself. And it doesn't have to be on one specific perspective. Look at all the Black perspectives. Look at every different way we try to come at these issues. Look at our revolutionaries. Also look at our politicians. Look at our teachers. Look at the people that are out there as full-time activists. Look at all those different range of options. All these different people come together to help this solution. They all are trying to get us in a better position. So definitely educate yourself. And last, I would really say, talk to people. And we have this culture now where we shy away from discourse. And it's not just within our own group, it's especially from people across the aisle, right? There's people that we see, oh, they like Trump, I'm not gonna talk to them. I'm not gonna be around them. I'm not going to associate yourself with them. They're conservative, I'm not gonna talk to them. That does nothing. All that does is enable you to just sing to the choir. All these protests, a lot of them, we're singing to the choir. We all are there for the same reason. Talk to the people that aren't there. Talk to the people that really couldn't care less. Talk to the people that don't understand. Talk to the people that want to understand and are trying to. Show them. And through that, that's why we have this in the first place. That's why I talked to Tyler in the first place. Because the way that we flesh out some of these things, the way we get through these problems, we hop over these obstacles, we have to talk. If we don't talk, then what are we really doing? So, in conclusion, educate yourself, go out and vote, and talk to people. And if you talk to people, people are going to surprise you with the things that they say and the things that they, and the way that they see the world in good ways.
Yeah.
Definitely do that. And like Kat said, shoot love. Shoot love.
Mm-hmm. I also think that, however you interpret this, I would say start local. And nothing that is systemic, I feel like, can be sustainable without the backs of local enforcement, local organizations, local structures. So whether that's local businesses, local schools, local organizations, start teaching locally, because eventually that does expand, that does break out. And I think a lot of people try to focus on like the massive daunting task of changing the national value that racism is bad, but you have to start small. Like you have to start small. I think a lot of people fail to really understand what that means, but you have to start within yourself. That's the first part. And then you have to be with those around you, because there's no other way to tackle such a daunting task as fixing racism without breaking at the foundation, because the local level is what builds what we are trying to destroy ultimately.
And just to speak to what Soren said, that is one of the biggest solutions, being comfortable with speaking to everyone. And like you said, also to your point, locally, there are a lot of people that we don't know. Our neighbors have differing opinions than what we have. But if we get into the conversation, if we start in that conversation, then there can be growth for each party, not just to learn about what change can be done, but also the history behind why it hasn't been changed. Johnny?
For me, where do we go from here? Like, this problem isn't going to change like that. And then for me, I believe that if this problem will be solved, we have to come together as a nation. Like, we have to work together in a conglomerate as a whole. Because remember, in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, it was mainly just people of color fighting for rights. So now we are in the year of 2020. I mean, we moved on from the 60s, but there's still work that needs to be done. So we're having multiple, like when I see these protests, me being diverse as it is, it just gives, like I said earlier, it gives me so much hope that things will change. So for things to actually happen, we have to all come on one accord for new reforms to come into place. We have to all go out and vote in our different elections and things like that. Things will change.
Anna, do you have anything to say?
So I believe that where do we go from here? There's two ways to go from here. The first thing is self-education, and the second thing is just understanding different people. For example, if you live in a suburban, pretty wealthy town that doesn't have exposure to lower income neighborhoods and who may think negatively upon these communities, like, go out and educate yourself on these communities instead of just holding this one mindset towards them. And maybe this will expand the way that you think and the way that you make your decisions. And also, speaking on this, I see this a lot at the protests as well. You see different people of all races gathering together. You see like Black, Hispanic, Asian, they're all coming together on and uniting on this certain issue. So I feel that this does connect us all as a community.
That self-education, you know, you guys are going to have a pretty long reading list for this summer. By the way, I'm going to send that to everybody once I get it all compiled. But Lucas, do you want to speak on at least your experience and then speak on how you can see us going from there?
Sure. So I think we need to remember that Tyler, you posted this on your Instagram earlier today, that the civil rights protest lasted 381 days, right? That's a lot of marching. That's a lot of advocating. That's a lot of getting out of your house and making change, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. We can't just expect the system to be fixed and go along with our lives. We need to keep up public pressure, hold elected officials accountable, and then vote. And obviously self-education, like Anna said.
We didn't really get that last part, but we did get the self-education is really important. Extremely. It's extremely important. Mia, you know, where do you think we can go from here?
So I just had a quick point. A lot of people were saying it in the chat, but I just wanted to reiterate that we just have to love each other. At the end of the day, if we're trying to understand how to fix racism, we have to understand that racism isn't something that you're born with. It's something that is taught. It's something that you learn, whether it be your parents or the community that you grew up in. I think that the same way you learn racism, you can unlearn it, and you can learn to love people regardless of what they look like, regardless of what skin color they were born with. So that's what I wanted to say.
And it is seen, you know, love can be the only thing that can counteract hate. But hopefully we can come together and unify with our love and organize that into tangible things that we want from the system, also things that we can see. Mason, you're on?
Yeah, just to reiterate what everybody's saying. When you guys go home, this doesn't stop. The movement doesn't stop. The love shouldn't stop either. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you guys for listening to us speak. At the end of the day, we're all teenagers, right? We shouldn't really have to be here, but this is the environment this is the landscape that we're in. You know, this is the community in which we live. These are the things that we have to deal with. And I mean, for those who don't know, me, Tyler, and Johnny, we started preparing this a week ago. We started, I believe, last Thursday. This is the product of a week's work because we realized how essential this was and how we couldn't wait another week to get this out. We didn't need to, so we got on every night. We were playing every single night. And the panelists were doing the same thing, and they were all helping us do that. So thank y'all for that. Thank you for being part of this. But just move in love, move in passion. When you think that people are saying some crazy stuff, and when you think that people are very far left what you're saying, listen, respond with kindness, respond with compassion, respond with humility. There's so many things that are decrepit from this world and that this world doesn't carry anymore. Chivalry is dead. People are mean in New York. There's a lot of things we gotta deal with. So to counteract that, be different. Be you, be uniquely you, but also bring in positivity. That's all we can ask. That's really all we can ask.
And I just wanted to let you guys know that this conversation does not stay within this COVID classroom experience. This conversation is something that will continue to happen. Whether the panel looks different or whether it's just at home with your family members, we need to continue this conversation in order to see change. And I definitely want to extend my thanks to everyone who came, everyone who stayed throughout the entirety of the discussion. Thank you to Marc Lamont-Hill for giving your piece. And thank you to everybody who supported this event in its producing. We're definitely coming out with more in the following weeks.
Yeah, again, thank you guys. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you to the panelists again. Thank you for working on this, guys. I know for me it was. Yeah, so thank you. And to all the people watching, again, thank you for taking an hour and like change out of your day to come here, a bunch of teenagers talk about this information. It means a lot, and these conversations are not stopping. We're going to be continuing these COVID classroom discussions throughout the summer. And it may get difficult when we get to college, but we're going to try to keep going in. So thank you.
Most definitely.
Thank you for being here. Y'all inspire us. Y'all make us, do more and engage and cause the drive that makes us go so hard in terms of different topics and discussions. So again, thank you a lot.
Thank you guys again. Tune in for the next discussion. We're going to send you guys more information in the following days. So just stay tuned.